Everyone deserves comfort in their final days. That's why animals have been part of hospice care for many years. They bring love and emotional support to people when they are most weak. But when Buddy the puppy came to a care home, he didn't seem to want to help anyone. At first, he stayed away from the patients. Still, little by little, he touched lives in a way no doctor or nurse ever had. He had a strange gift no one could explain. A doctor from Brown University decided to study Buddy, and what he found shocked everyone. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The hospice was a quiet place. The walls were painted soft colors, the lights were gentle, and the halls were filled with silence. Here, patients came not to be cured, but to be cared for in their final days. Nurses moved carefully from room to room, always with kind smiles, but behind every door there was a story of pain, waiting, and goodbye. Even in this heavy atmosphere, the staff wanted to bring comfort. They knew medicine was not the only thing people needed. They needed warmth, love, and a reason to smile. That's when the idea of a therapy puppy began. A small, golden-furred puppy was brought to the hospice, his bright eyes shining with innocence. The puppy's paws clicked softly on the floor as he walked down the hallway. Patients looked up when they saw him, and some even smiled for the first time in days. The staff could already see the difference. Something about the little dog's energy touched hearts in a way words could not. But the staff didn't know that this puppy's biggest impact was still to come. There was one room at the end of the hallway. Inside, a woman lay weak and silent, barely opening her eyes anymore. And when the puppy entered that room, everything would change. At the end of the hall was a quiet room. Inside lay Mrs. Thompson, a woman who had once been full of life but was now weak and fragile. Tubes and machines surrounded her bed, softly beeping, reminding everyone that her time was running short. She had not spoken in weeks, and most of the time, her eyes stayed closed. The nurses cared for her gently. They cleaned her, adjusted her blankets, and whispered kind words, though she never replied. Sometimes they saw her lips move as if she wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Her family had already said their goodbyes, believing she would not last much longer. To many, Mrs. Thompson seemed lost in her own silent world, but there was something in her face, a quiet strength, that made the nurses hope she was still listening, even if she could not respond. They wished for a miracle, something to wake her spirit, even if just for a moment. When the therapy puppy arrived at the hospice, the staff decided to try something different. One afternoon, they carefully opened the door to Mrs. Thompson's room and brought the little dog inside. No one expected much, but what happened next would leave everyone in shock. The nurse pushed the door open and carried the little puppy inside. His small paws dangled as he looked around with curious eyes. The room was quiet, only the soft hum of machines filling the air. Mrs. Thompson lay still, her eyes closed, her face pale. The nurse placed the puppy gently on the bed beside her. For a moment, nothing happened. The puppy tilted his head, then slowly walked closer. He sniffed the blanket, then nudged her hand with his tiny nose. Everyone in the room held their breath. At first, there was no reaction. Mrs. Thompson's hand lay limp, her fingers thin and fragile. But then, to everyone's surprise, her fingers twitched. The puppy wagged his tail and licked her hand softly, as if encouraging her. A quiet gasp escaped the nurse. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Another nurse leaned closer, her eyes wide. Mrs. Thompson's fingers moved again, this time curling slightly toward the puppy. The puppy, full of innocence, climbed closer and laid his small body against her arm. For the first time in weeks, her breathing seemed calmer, less strained. The room, once filled with sadness, now carried a spark of hope. The nurses exchanged looks of disbelief. Something had happened that no medicine had managed to do. The puppy had reached her in a way no one else could. And this was only the beginning. The nurses stood frozen, watching closely. The little puppy snuggled against Mrs. Thompson's weak arm, refusing to move. Then slowly her eyelids began to flicker. For weeks, she had not opened her eyes. But now, as if drawn by the warmth of the puppy, they opened just a little. One nurse rushed to call the doctor while the other stayed near her side. "Mrs. Thompson," she whispered gently. The old woman's lips trembled. And then, to everyone's shock, a faint sound escaped. At first it was only a whisper, but then a clear word formed. "Buddy," she said softly. Tears filled the nurse's eyes. Mrs. Thompson had not spoken in so long, and now one small puppy had made her voice return. When the doctor arrived, he could hardly believe it. Mrs. Thompson was now looking at the puppy, her hand weakly stroking his fur. She whispered again, this time longer. "He looks just like my Buddy." The staff soon learned Buddy was the name of her childhood dog, the one she loved deeply and never forgot. Memories she had kept hidden, locked away in silence, were now flowing back with each touch of the puppy. For the first time in months, the room wasn't filled with sorrow. It was filled with hope, laughter, and tears of joy. The puppy had done something no medicine could do. He had awakened her spirit. The nurses couldn't keep the moment to themselves. They recorded a short video of Mrs. Thompson gently touching the puppy and speaking for the first time in weeks. When they shared it with her family, tears flowed on both sides. Her loved ones were amazed to hear her voice again. Soon the story spread beyond the hospice walls. Staff members posted about the miracle puppy on social media. Within hours, thousands of people around the world were watching the clip, leaving comments filled with love and wonder. "This is the power of animals," one person wrote. "They heal hearts in ways medicine cannot." News reporters picked up the story. Cameras arrived at the hospice, eager to share the touching moment. Mrs. Thompson, once silent and forgotten by the world, had become a symbol of hope. People who had never met her were sending letters, gifts, and prayers, thanking the little puppy for showing such pure love. Other hospices and hospitals started to think differently. If one small dog could spark such a change, maybe therapy, animals could bring comfort and healing to many more. Mrs. Thompson's story was no longer just hers. It had become an inspiration across the globe. And yet, the most beautiful part of the story was still unfolding quietly in her room. From that day on, the little puppy became a regular visitor to Mrs. Thompson's room. Each time he curled up beside her, her face softened, and her lips whispered old memories of her life and her beloved dog, Buddy. The nurses noticed she seemed calmer, happier, and more at peace. Her final days were no longer filled with silence. Instead, they were filled with gentle words, soft laughter, and the comfort of warm fur resting by her side. The puppy had given her something no medicine could, a reason to feel alive again, even at the end of her journey. When Mrs. Thompson eventually passed away, it was not in loneliness. She left this world with the little puppy by her side, surrounded by love, peace, and dignity. The hospice staff wept, but they also smiled because they had witnessed something truly special. Her story continued to inspire people everywhere. More hospices and hospitals began opening their doors to therapy animals, giving patients comfort in their most fragile moments. Families who read about her felt hope, realizing that even in the hardest times, love can still shine through. And so, the lesson lived on. Sometimes, the smallest creatures can create the biggest miracles.